Hello, and welcome to Local Listens. On this week's episode, we have Will and Raina of Tacoma folk metal band Siren's Reign on to talk about their upcoming album, Rise Forth, their musical background, the band's writing process, and how COVID has affected the band. They mention so many other bands throughout this episode that we will try to put all the bands in the episode description. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in this week for Local Listens. I am Shane.
I'm Marina, and I am the vocalist, and I also play percussion and the harp.
I'm Will. I'm the bassist and backing vocals.
Are there any other instruments that you guys play outside of the band?
We collect a bunch of instruments. It doesn't necessarily mean that we play them. So we have some accordions, we have a dulcimer, we have an auto harp or two. You've got didgeridoos. There's a bunch of like hand percussion.
Massive keyboard, like we have an organ. We have a lot of instruments that we don't actually play.
I did, I don't say I do, but I did play drums for a very long time, like mostly in school, like marching drum type stuff. Like I'm not super confident with a kit. My drummer says I'm like a B+. Like I'm a B+ drummer, and that's okay.
I mean, honestly, like besides playing hand drums, frame drum a little bit, like no, I play bass.
All right. I know, Will, you've been in other bands.
My first one was Solstein, which was kind of experimental metal, somewhere between Evanescence and Atreyu. That was an interesting project. Then there was Final Wish, which was my biggest project for a long time. Progressive black and death metal. I was in Morbidism for a bit, which was just mostly a fun project because, it was drunken bar metal. Yeah, have a drink, play, not care. That was kind of it. Like I was in Hellas for a little bit. They were old friends of mine from Final Wish, but it didn't really work out. So I kind of gave up, and I was like, I'm done unless I have folk or symphonic metal. And so once Siren's Reign popped up, hey, there's my folk metal. So it got to my passion.
Awesome. And how about you, Raina? Are you only Siren's Reign, or have you been in other projects?
I've been in bands since I was 16. My first band was, I don't exactly know what you would call it. I thought it was emo, but then when I listened to CDs of it, it sounds more like West Coast girly grunge, which was weird because we were on the East Coast and didn't really listen to that music. But I was in an emo band called Raining and Stereo, and I was the drummer and the singer. And that was high school. And then I got into a really bad car accident a week before I went to college, and I had damage to my throat and soft palate, so I wasn't able to sing for like 5 years. So I was going to be a music major in college, and I was going to be in bands and sing. I had already made arrangements to sing the national anthem and be in choir and everything, and my musical dreams were completely just cast away. And then it took me a year to relearn how to sing. So I started being in bands again in 2010. Up here, I was in a thrash metal band called Hide the Scars. And then there was another project, I can't even remember the name of it because we played 2 shows. Then there was another little project called Promethean Eulogy, and we played 2 shows. And then the drummer went to Australia for school or something. But we all keep in touch, like we're all friends, and they come to my shows and go to their shows. So yeah, that's the story.
All right. So when did you start music?
There was a member of both my first 2 bands, Solstein and Final Wish, guitarist, and before that, like before we started those bands, like I didn't play an instrument, but it was meeting him that got me interested in playing music. And so I did the kind of stereotypical standard thing of I picked up a cheap bass at a pawn shop to start playing something, and with the intention of learning to play guitar. And I picked up a pretty cheap guitar later, and for a while I was okay at both, but then I just started getting better at bass, and my guitar playing went straight down the toilet. So it's been a long time. I do have to thank that friend of mine, Adam. He's the one that got me into music, and we started 2 bands together and stuff. over the years. But yeah, it was probably about 20 years ago that I started playing. When I started playing, I didn't realize that it was going to end up being one of my choices professionally to like really try to be a touring, like playing musician. It started for fun, but once it took a hold of me, like, now I can't imagine doing anything else. I almost gave it up once. Like when Final Wish broke up, it kind of destroyed me for a bit, and it took me a while to get that back. Once I did, I can't imagine giving it up.
All right.
I've always been musical. Like I've always sang, and my mom was a piano teacher, and we've just always had music, and I was always a singer, and that was never a question of not being a singer. And I had planned on doing music professionally and in college, but then because of injury and illness, I couldn't. And that seems to be a theme in my life. Like whenever I get really close to doing it, something really bad happens, like car accidents and Lyme disease and stuff like that. But there was never a time where I didn't do music. I started off singing, and then I played the drums, and then I started playing the harp about a year ago. But I've always primarily been a singer, and I used to sing in church, and I used to sing for like weddings and funerals and that type of thing, like as an independent singer. And I did some like opera, classical, like musical theater type training that I'd wanted to continue in college, but that wasn't able to happen because of that car accident.
Whoa.
So yeah, so it's been really like back and forth. Like as soon as like, oh yeah, we're going to Europe, like something bad happens, or oh yeah, like going to college for music, something bad happens. So that's kind of been my relationship with music.
Yeah, you've been battling Lyme disease and still going out and performing and being badass in shows. And then, of course, you had the Europe tour you were trying to do, and then COVID comes and shuts that all down. So one of these days, things will work.
Like, yeah, and it's probably not even going to be next year. It's probably going to be like 2023 at this point, and we're still working on our full-length album, and that's been challenging with COVID too. It's not really a recording project that we can do ourselves. We have an engineer that we work with, finicky instruments, and everything is so layered. It's a kind of a complicated project. So I think we have 3 songs left we have to record. We have to write one of them, but we have two that are finished, and then
is anything completely finished on this, like with all vocals and everything?
No, nothing is completely finished. It was supposed to be, but because like we had time booked and then COVID, and then like with the restrictions changing all of the time, it's been difficult to do that. And then we're gonna go the end of this month to finish
our vocals
and the edits, and then Ed is gonna go back in and do his guitar parts and add different things.
And his vocals.
So the thing about our music is that for whatever reason, and we didn't do this on purpose, and I wouldn't call myself a diva at all by any means, maybe sometimes, but not usually, but the music is kind of written around the vocals. So the guitars and stuff have to go down first, of course, and then the vocals, and then we have to come back and do other parts because those parts cue off of the vocals. But that's the way that people write in the band. Like the guitar player, Ed, who writes the main riffs, like he really cues off of the vocals, and it's kind of just how we write music. It just happened that way.
All right. That bridges into like 2 different things that I had written down to ask about, because you had the Nightmares from the Abyss album that came out in like 2019, and you had an album, like a EP or something before that.
Beneath the Narrows.
Okay, Beneath the Narrows. And then you have the new album you're working on. Do you have any like ETA of when that's getting out?
It won't happen because we've already tried to do that and it doesn't happen. So
probably realistically by like August.
Hoping.
Okay.
Like we have album art is done for it, and it's just we're really taking our time with it, and as it's kind of sat there, like other ideas pop up, or we're like, oh, we need this or whatever. So it's not rushed, and there's different people in the band. Each album we've had a different lineup, which is kind of interesting. It's changed the instrumentation, it's changed how we've written, but with this particular lineup, like we're just giving things a lot of space. We're not rushing things. I think maybe the last album was rushed
The first album was rushed.
Yeah, the first two were rushed. Like, oh, we got to get this out here and we want to do this. And, you know, like you listen to your old stuff and you're like, oh, I didn't like that, or oh, I do like that, or so
Yeah.
I definitely think we really like this one. It's we changed drummers, so that'll be something that's really noticeable. The style of drumming is going to be different on this album. And then on the first album, we had harp and mandolin. We didn't have that on the last one. We're going to have that on this one. And then there's going to be some nickel harpa and viola on this one, I think, too. And a lot of drumming. And the other thing that's unique about this one is like a lot of group vocals and different types of vocal styles.
More percussion too, multiple frame drum added in, which is something we haven't done before.
Yeah, I'm really excited to actually like hear the final products, because the last album was great, and then just hearing some of the like new stuff you guys are putting down, and like you're changing the sound a little bit, and it's kind of like exciting to see what you're gonna do with it. You mentioned lineup changes and everything. How many people are actually in the band now? Because it used to be a lot.
Currently 5. Like we were gonna open up to try to find, you know, replace some of the ones we lost. Not necessarily, you know, because over the years we've had so much morphing of different instruments. We've had everything from bagpipe to harp to, you know, multiple violins, hurdy-gurdy, all that. But, you know, COVID's kind of made it even difficult to audition. So we're at 5, which is kind of the core of the band. We wanted to audition and look for more, and we're pretty open on that, but it's just a difficult place.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned like rushing previous albums and not liking it and like taking your time and everything, which I totally relate to, because it took like a year and a half for me to record and actually put out my album, mostly because COVID hit and I lost like motivation. But yeah, so you got the new album coming out. With so many members, what is your writing process? Is it kind of a like somebody just kind of spits an idea of like, hey, we should write about this topic, or what comes first?
So in the first album, there were definitely too many cooks in the kitchen, and because we had 11 instruments, we had hurdy-gurdy, 2 violins, we had harp, we had, you know, all this stuff, and it was really cool. And we had one person that was like super enthusiastic about playing all the instruments he could. So he was very good at it, but I think
he'd outwrite himself. Like he'd write amazing pieces that he couldn't repeat.
Yeah, because they were like too fast or too difficult, or like wouldn't be able, like a Dragon Force type thing, like you wouldn't be able to replicate it. It was really cool. So because of that, you know, we get feedbacks and reviews and we take that to heart. You know, we listen to what people think and say. And on the second album, what we did is we just had the guitar section and myself. We would have like a whiteboard and we would sketch out a song and we'd count everything out. And so we'd get the guitar and bass and then bring the drums in, and then we would add the folk instruments. And you can definitely hear that the compositions are much more solid. On the second album, we had hurdy-gurdy violin and flute.
And keys.
We definitely did that on this album too. We still sketch things out, but as far as ideas, Ed has like 3 different recorders, and he has 3 different recorders because he kept buying them and then losing them. And then like recorder, there's hundreds of riffs and ideas on there. And so we'll go through some of those, or sometimes we'll just start jamming at like we'll intend to work on a song that we have or started, and then we'll just start jamming, and then something really awesome will come out, and then we're like, okay, we're gonna play that instead. And then that becomes a song. So sometimes it's organized, and then sometimes it's not.
Chaos!
So like if we're trying too hard, then it doesn't work. Like if we're trying too hard, we just don't have any inspiration or, you know, creativity. And some days like it's just a flop. But either we're like we jam it out and then we're like, oh yeah, or we sketch it out. So I guess those are our 2 ways.
There's been like one of our newest songs, we just finalized it recently. This is going to be a symphony of a song. It's like 9 minutes long too. We had parts of this song for a very long time, and we're like, what do we do to finish this? And we were having a writing block on it. You know, it's like, it was good, we loved it. There was no way we were going to scrap it, but we couldn't figure out how to finish it. And then all of a sudden one day we played something else and like, wait a minute, it just spontaneously grew into this masterpiece that I can't wait to actually record and put out there. But this one we haven't even tracked a single thing on yet. Like we literally just finished writing. And it's going to have a lot of instrumentation. It's definitely going to have some harp dominant parts and new instrumentation and stuff. So that'll be the longest song we've ever laid down. I like Simple.
That's like the worst part of the process of having everything written and you got that idea down and then you're just waiting to actually do something with it.
And then sometimes you forget it.
Yeah.
Nothing's worse than a song that was complete and then for some reason it doesn't get finished 100% and then you forget it.
Yeah. So one of my favorite songs of yours is that 13 Steps to Hell. Who was the one who pitched that idea, or how was that written?
Ed riff farm, me composition of lining it up, and you writing vocals.
But I think we were making fun of like polka, and then we got the Oompa Oompas.
Is that how this started?
I think so. Like we were making fun of polka or something, and just like messing around, and then that started. And I read a lot of ghost stories. And we try to do local type things. Yeah, so that's actually a local story. And that's really fun. That song is actually going to be redone on this album with the heavier drums. And so we've changed some things. There's going to be a different version of this song on Rise Forth.
Nice. So Rise Forth, that's the name of the new album?
Yes.
Okay. Being a folk metal band, especially in Tacoma, where like people talk about local folk metal bands, it's kind of just you. What would be your like musical influences?
So I think we both listen to different types of folk metal, and folk metal as itself is kind of an umbrella term. Like folk metal bands don't sound alike. There are common elements like the lyrics and then, blending folk and metal instrumentation, but like Nile is like an Egyptian metal band, and they could be technically folk metal band. Amon Amarth is technically a folk metal band. So for me, I think that with our band, and I guess it's changed a little bit because we've kind of, so the pandemic happened, so we started accidentally writing more gloominess. Like it was kind of doomy metal-ish.
There was definitely some stuff we were playing and writing for a while that might not show up on albums. Because we got in a bad place. Like we were playing doom metal.
And we didn't realize it, and we're like, oh God, that's our subconscious. But I think like some of the major folk metal bands that we have been influenced by would be like Eluveitie and korpiklaani. Vocally, I'm influenced by Nightwish, and I really like, and Ed and I are really into Lamb of God. So there's definitely some Lamb of God there, and also Ed is super into like Iron Maiden. Like there's a lot of Iron Maiden riffs in there. Yeah, we'll get on these kicks and we'll be like, oh, that's so and so. So I think earlier in the band, like our original founding member, he was like all folk, so he would listen to traditional music from hundreds of years ago, and he would like weave things in and make his own reels. And we don't really have that. So I think a lot of our folkiness now is in the drumming, and then our mandolin guitar player Mike, he just comes up with like really cool mando riffs. Sometimes it's very Celtic mando.
I'm amazed at how fast he picked up that instrument.
Yeah, he just comes up with really cool stuff.
That is awesome. I picked up mandolin once. Something about like fretting two strings with the same finger. My hands don't like it, but
try a 12-string triple step bass. That's nice. Then you're fretting 3 strings at a time.
Yeah, I don't think my fingers are strong enough, but
Will's fingers are too big for the mandolin. Like it doesn't.
It's actually how I call him Heaney. Like I can never get to calling him Mike. Like we had 2 Mikes in the band. I called him by his last name. He's always gonna be Heaney to me. But it's like it was my mandolin they started playing on that I bought for myself because hey, I like to buy instruments to see what I can play, but second I started trying to play mandolin, it's like, oh, this is way too small. My hands are too big. I can't fret this thing. So I'm not getting rid of it, but it ended up having a use. So that was great.
That's kind of what happens. Like, our house tends to be a way station for different instruments, and then they end up in other people's possession. Like, I was given a cello, and then now Ed has it, and we had a trumpet at one point, and so like we get gifted instruments lots
There's
of
still
times.
a flute here someplace.
Yeah, people are like, "Oh, here, have an instrument," and we're like, "Okay." And then eventually somebody else will come along and that instrument will be for them. But that's kind of what happens. Like, we just accumulate instruments in the house. And I'm getting my big harp soon. I'm so excited. I don't know where I'm going to put it though, but I'll figure that out when it gets here, I guess.
See, it's so crazy with how expensive harps can be, because one of my favorite stories of harp being in an album, it's not even being played. There's a Florence and the Machine album where during her tour, the tour bus was in an accident and it started on fire. And in one of the recordings, you hear the strings of the harp breaking because of the heat of the fire. And to think of how expensive that instrument is. And it's in the album just being destroyed.
The strings on a pedal harp are about $500.
Oh my God.
Just to restring it, if you buy them in a pack. So yeah, it's definitely an expensive instrument to take care of.
Yeah. Holy crap. So with all the like instruments and stuff that the band has had, or the amount of members, you got to have some like good best and worst show stories, or it would at least seem like it. So what would be like the show that comes to mind when you think of like your best show you've played?
I could jump on the worst show ever instantly. The best show, that's a hard one, because touring, when we toured with Scythia, like we played up in Calgary and stuff. That was wonderful. It was a small dive bar in Calgary, but it was still great. We were the last band at, what year was it for Hemp Fest? 2019, 2018 Seattle Hemp Fest. Last band on the black stage. That was cool. There was some disasters behind it, including the power main getting disconnected right as we took stage. But it was a glorious show. We headlined the last ever Olympia Hemp Fest. We've had some great shows. It's actually really hard to say. We opened for korpiklaani and Arkona. That's to open for two of the godfathers of your genre is a wonderful experience.
The worst show was, we played this little bar in Burien that is no longer there. It wasn't ever really a venue. Okay, so we get there, and like, we've got pro gear, and there's a lot of us, and we've done this for a while, and we're like, okay, so where's the sound person? And they're like, the bartender will plug in the PA for you. I'm like, what?
Oh no.
What? So they had like, I don't even know how big the channel board was.
It was 4-channel.
But it
was a 4-channel board.
It wasn't big enough for us. So we had to go have one of Ed's friends go to Guitar Center and rent a PA.
No, he brought Ed's PA. We didn't rent one.
Oh, I thought we did.
No, we didn't rent, but he brought it from wherever.
Port Orchard.
Yeah, from Port Orchard. He brought our PA to this place. On a moment's notice, because they promised us, like the booker promised us, oh yeah, no problem. We have an 8-channel PA, which bare minimum running at power. We can make 8 channels work. No, we get there, and yeah, that was a nice mess.
Like, their gear was not powerful enough, and like, you couldn't hear us. And then, like, I don't know, like, probably should have seen the red flags, but the show was rescheduled like 3 times.
We changed venues.
So yeah, but we really like to play, so we are like, okay, whatever. And then when we got there, like, in retrospect, we're all like, yeah, we should have just left, but we didn't.
But the venue treated us well. The venue itself, like the bar, the bartenders, even the owner of the place, let's just say it didn't end too well for the booking agent. But, they treated us quite well. The food there was good. They have house-made ghost pepper infused Patron, so I was happy with that. But, it was a nice place overall. Not a venue. Good bar, good food. Not a venue.
All right.
That was definitely the worst show. It was, yeah.
That was an interesting nightmare.
So you mentioned how that wasn't a venue anymore. Do you have any venues that you would call like your favorite venue? I know we've lost like quite a bit of venues with COVID and everything, but
I really liked Luigi's. And
yeah,
and
that's a sad one to lose.
The Swiss was awesome. Swiss has been there for years. It wasn't quite as comfortable of a venue, but it was a great bar and a great venue in itself. It really was.
We haven't, in Tacoma, we haven't played the Pig yet, which I assume we will do at some point. And then we played Elko. Like, Elko's interesting. I liked that. That was fun when we played the walk-in battle of the bands, and we were on that smaller stage. And all the bands had to play a 20-minute set. Well, when all your songs are like 6 or 7 minutes long, that's kind of hard to do. So
we played 3 songs.
And we tried to re-engineer our songs and like cut, here and there, and like, well, what if we played this or didn't repeat this chorus or whatever, and we couldn't do it. So we ended up playing 3 songs that were like 18 minutes, and then we had crowd banter. And one of the other bands that we played with, they had a similar problem, but they actually wrote 5 shorter songs specifically for that show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they were thinking about us too. I'm like, what did you guys do? They're like, oh, we just wrote shorter songs. I'm like, oh, well, we did what we did, and that was fun. But
I think definitely one of the funnest ones, while not being venue exactly show-wise, because it's moved between 2 different venues, is Metal Meets Metal with the Armored Combat League. That's getting to play metal while knights in full armor and real weapons are fighting. Like, that's a different experience. And there's no venue behind that. It's wherever the event goes. But that's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, and I got to catch the last Metal Meets Metal that you played, and that was amazing. To just go like, all right, play like 2 or 3 songs, stop. There's like a medieval fight that happens, and then go back, play 2 or 3 songs, another medieval fight that happens. It was kind of perfect to have a folk metal band play.
So we found out, I didn't find this out until a couple months ago, but like we were all exposed to COVID when we were there. There was like a fighter from Australia, and he had COVID and he didn't know it. So we were all exposed last February.
Great. Huh.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, at least we're all like okay, but that explains February.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's a year ago. It's been
our last show was March 13th before all the shutdown. 2 days before, I think, Patty's.
It was the 13th. It was Friday the 13th. St. Patrick's Day is the 17th.
Yeah. So it was.
But what I remember most about that show was that it was a couple days. It was like 2 days before the actual lockdown began, and before our set, we are eating dinner in the bar, and the TV is on, and it's WWE SmackDown.
Yeah.
And it's a women's event, and there's nobody in the crowd because they couldn't have anyone in the crowd, and they were still like going up and going, oh, and like doing all the crowd stuff that they do because it's rehearsed. They're actresses, and I'm like, this is the weirdest, most strangest avant-garde piece of art I've ever seen. It was so surreal. It was so strange. I will always remember that. Like, you can go on YouTube and look at that, like March 2020 WWE, no audience, and the commentators are acting like there's people in the audience, and that's what I really remember about that show.
I remember people posting about that, and I saw a couple clips, and it was so weird. I still can't believe that they did the Super Bowl with a full crowd and everything this year, but can you imagine that like the Super Bowl happens and they do that same thing? Where they just like pretend the crowd is there? It would be so funny.
I know they said that like they only had 25,000 people, and I'm like, only?
Yeah, only.
That's 25% capacity.
Irresponsible, but
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, like videos of people like in bars and on the streets, and they're not wearing masks. I don't think it's worth it to jeopardize your health to see a sports ball game,
Yeah.
But
so, what are some dream shows?
korpiklaani is one of those top ones right there. So like that's a nice one under the belt because.
Well, I think the show would be if we could play walk-in winter nights.
Yeah.
Because folk metal's become such a big thing. They have their own folk metal festival now, So Wacken is in the summertime, and Wacken Open Air Winter Nights is in February or something like that.
And it's just pure folk.
It's just folk metal. So I think that would be super, super awesome to do.
Who else band-wise would we want to play with? Heidevolk is definitely one. Eluveitie would be great. No lie, I would absolutely love to play with the Alestorm. To play with those pirate metal guys. Amon Amarth, like you don't get more Viking metal than them. Like those guys are amazing.
Amon Amarth puts on a good show, especially when they changed the mosh pit to a rowing pit and people like sit in a row and pretend to be rowing. That's so fun to see.
What I love, one of the things I love about the singer is, you know, if you're singing in metal and you forget the words, just scream, because no one's gonna care and no one's gonna understand because it's metal. He's like, don't be too hard on yourself. It's just metal. And I'm like, if Amon Amarth can say that, just go like, blah, I'm like, I can do that. So. I love that attitude. And one of my favorite things to do is looking at YouTube videos of my favorite artists and seeing them mess up and how they handled that. And it's really funny. Like Tarja, she's like, no, we start again. I have been a really big fan of Amy Lee, and every time we've seen them play, she's messed up. And it's really funny because she'll go, shit. I just think it's cool because there doesn't have to be perfectionism. I think there's perceived perfectionism, and with recording, I mean, you can be perfect on a recording, but when you're playing in real life, like you're always going to hit a note or you're going to play the wrong chord or whatever. And it's nice to see, you know, like when Slipknot does that or like when Tarja does that. So I enjoy seeing bloopers.
What would both of you say like your favorite bands are? Because you mentioned you both listen to like different types of music.
Oh, we made a list.
Yo, you go.
Okay. My tastes are pretty eclectic, and so these are the 5 that I came up with today, but if you asked me tomorrow, it would probably change. So, Eluveitie, definitely. I love Lamb of God. I love listening to Randy's voice, and I like their lyrics so much. Nightwish, I think, is definitely a really big influence, and my favorites are Floor and Tarja. This is probably my most mainstream band. I really like Breaking Benjamin, and it's because, well, they're from Pennsylvania, and at the time that they started to come out, I was in college in New York, and they would play all the time, but I'd never come see them. I just hear them on the radio, and then all of a sudden they got like super, super big. But it's mood music for me. Like I always find a Breaking Benjamin song that I like. And then this is gonna kind of not go with the rest of the list, but I love Cradle of Filth. And that is actually how I got into folk metal. I went to a Cradle of Filth concert in Seattle, like in 2010 or something like that, maybe before. And I walked in there, and there's this band, and they're wearing like leather armor, and they've got face paint, and there's a chick with an accordion on stage. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And it was Turisas, and I don't really know why Turisas and Cradle were on the same bill, because it doesn't quite fit, but it kind of does. But that's how I learned about folk metal. I'm like, this is so strange. It's happy metal. Like people are line dancing, and like there's an accordion. Oh my God, what is this? So that's how I got into folk metal. All right, your bands.
Well, hands down, my favorite, like a long time now, has been FLESHGOD Apocalypse, Italian symphonic death metal. I absolutely adore them. I sit there and lose myself blaring their music at high volume. It was great. The first, pay for watch studio lockdown show, we watched their live feed from their studio, and it's something to see them out of costume and everything and just playing their show, and it was absolutely wonderful. I love Rest in Peace, but Unexpect out of Canada. A lot of people can't stand them or understand what they did musically because it's a bit too prog for everyone. Like it's really driven by an 11-string bassist, and they had violins and everything, and they went everywhere. Really bridge genres, and I love that. Like the bridging of genres is one of the reasons I am so happy being in folk metal. It's Chthonic out of Taiwan. They are folk metal. It took them forever to be recognized as folk metal by the groups and everything because they sound very Cradle of Filth, but they have an Urhu, and all their lyrics are written about their mythology. And
Tell them what happened to Freddie.
oh, and well, unfortunately, Chthonic is kind of on a small break. The last show they played was exceptionally huge, but Freddie, their lead singer, actually got elected to parliament in Taiwan, so he's actually a political figure now.
Wow.
So they a metal band at an inauguration, which would never happen here, but it's so amazing.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Look it up. It is very epic. Yeah, so there's probably my top three. When you start wanting me to pick that number 5, I really can't, like, because that closes off the list, because I can sit here and say Heidevolk, I can say Amon Amarth, I can say Alestorm, I can say Arkona, I can say, all sorts of bands that I love so much. It's just, I can't close off that, it's just, it feels unfair to all those bands I really love.
All right. And then kind of breaking away from the theme of music a little bit, because we're getting to the end here, but other than music, what other like hobbies and stuff do you like to do? Like, what other artistic things are you doing?
Okay, I paint. I like to paint with acrylics, and I'm more of an abstract artist. I also, and I know a lot of people did this, but I learned how to bake bread, and I'm very good at it, and this is not something that I'm going to stop doing. So, and I knit. I pick different crafts and I go through them. And the next one that I'm going to do is I want to make soap, like cold pressed fancy soap. So that's my next thing. But I do a lot of baking, and painting, and I read a lot. I love to read. And I think probably what we do most is like we spend time with our dogs. We have a zoo here. And so we spend a lot of time with our dogs.
And then me, well, I craft drinking horns. I've been a brewer for a long time of every sort. Like, I love the art of fermentation, whether it's kombucha, Voss, beer, mead, wine. Like, the art of fermentation, I absolutely love it. I keep dabbling in it, keep working towards eventually one day hopefully opening a brewery. Lately, I've been dabbling in a resin casting, which kind of stems off of making the drinking horns. It's very new to me, but I use a lot of resin in the drinking horn. So I was like, I got it laying around. Let's see what else I can do. So started ordering molds and seeing what I can cast that way.
I'm doing cool. Like a chest set, and
I ordered dice molds, but the post office lost them someplace in the post office.
They're like, okay, it's here, but
they got rescanned again this morning, but that guy's up, and now we can't find it.
So
wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're out of questions, so thank you so much for partaking in this interview. I now invite you to listen to 13 Steps of Hell off Siren's Reign's album, Nightmares from the Abyss. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Local Listens. Next week's guest is Rashad Holt, on to talk about networking and doing what he can to keep moving as an artist through COVID. We hope you tune in next time and have a great and music-filled week.